Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Archival Discourses. We're finally back to regular programming after the hiatus with the millennial culture streams. As enjoyable as they were, we need to return to regular programming. We can't forever reminisce about the recent cultural production of years past. And tonight, a very special stream. I'm going to be reading through a quite a short book called The Charm of Egypt by Filippo Marinetti. For a bit of introduction, Marinetti is someone I've discussed on the channel before. He was the kind of one of the intellectual leaders of the Italian futurist movement, an artistic movement in the early 20th century. And I did a stream with Mr. D and Fen de Villiers about coming up to 2 years now. I'm looking at futurism in more depth, looking at some of the art and the thought behind it. And this is a bit of a lesser known work of Marinetti's because he didn't really paint or write any art. He mostly was more of a writer, and so he wrote a lot of poetry and a lot of he wrote the manifesto on futurism. And just to give a bit of an introduction, I'm just going to read the blurb on the back of my copy, which is by Antelope Hill Press or publisher. And full disclosure, Antelope Hill actually sent me this book for free as a review copy, so I'm very appreciative that they did that. They also sent me a few other books in their catalogue, so thank you very much, Antelope Hill. I'll enjoy reading through those. So without further ado, Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, born in Alexandria in the Khedivate of Egypt in 1876 to an Italian couple, came of age during the turn of the 20th century. He witnessed the rapid advancement of industrial society, observed the struggles of Europe's great powers as a war reporter, and saw firsthand the cataclysmic events of the Great War while a soldier in the Italian army. Marinetti founded the Italian Futurist movement, which emphasized dynamism, speed, technology, youth, and violence, finding inspiration in the automobile, the airplane, and the industrial city, and aimed to liberate Italy from the weight of its past. Futurism's key figures were Marinetti himself, Umberto Boccioni, Carlo Cara, Fortunato De Pero, Gino Severini, Giacomo Balla, and Luigi Rossello. He was also gained some influence outside of Italy, notably with the Englishman Wyndham Lewis, whose Vorticist style drew heavily on futurism. Marinetti found the world of the great powers, tied down by their immense histories, to be suffocating and moribund, like an open-air museum. He loved above all else the world of action and fire, machine guns, cannons, and ironclad vessels. On the shared love of action, he drew close to Mussolini's fascists, who their relationship was often troubled by Marinetti's criticism of what he perceived to be fascism's reactionary tendencies. Originally published in 1933 as Il Fascino dell'Egitto, Marinetti's The Charm of Egypt is both a diary and an artistic rendering of his adventures among the Egyptian dunes. Marinetti paints the world as he saw it, through his unique futurist perspective. His reflections on the land of his birth and the changes wrought upon it by the forward march of technology come together in this fascinating homage to that ancient and beautiful land. And covering these books also fitting because, as people know, I'm a bit of an Orientalist, so any work that sort of is commenting on the nature of the Orient, I'm always up for. So, without further ado, what's interesting with this Antelope Hill version is that it's a dual book, so it's where like half of it is in Italian and the other half is in English. So you'll read a page, you'll have it in Italian on the left and in English on the right. So I always appreciate it when books do that. So if I ever decided to learn Italian, I guess this could be a good book to do that with. So, okay. So to start with, the first is essentially a series of chapters or essays. So the first one, The Last Shred of a Futurist's Sensibilities. After many dynamic and creative years, I returned to a fixed point of contemplation, Egypt, the land of my birth. For a long time, its skies filled with placid gold dust, the motionless waves of the yellow dunes, the high imposing triangles of the pyramids, and the serene palm trees that bless the fat Father Nile, stretched out in the bed of black earth and green grass, have been calling me. The name and the roll of the ship, Helouan, already evoked the languid sailing rhythm of the sands and the large canvas wings of the windmills that protected my childhood games from the sun. The temperature of the sea and the air softens as if the heated cheeks of my pupae were palpitating inside. My sensitivity tore apart, and I became its thinking open wound, charged across the arch of the marine horizon with my living shreds. Gently, so as to not tear them, I grabbed from time to time those vibrant, undulating strips of my flesh. A strange desire to escape drives them mad. Most of all, the long rosy memory of the French Jesuit college is stirred, with its immense courtyard guarded by palm trees, the clamouring tangle of fast bare legs, seafaring necks, parabolas of balls plunging deep into a dense green paradise of sycamores, magnolias, and bamboo. Here the fragrant and sonorous feast of the Sacred Heart is reborn. The altar full of jasmine was nestled in the foliage of a baobab tree, whose trunk dripped with the rose petals. In the hot May afternoon, the flames of candles, the flashing tinkling of the censers, and the quick vermilion cassock so intoxicated the turtle doves perched on the high regimes of the date trees that the sensual gliding of their talons over the water stirred our children's senses to the point of agony. Now, that is a very beautifully written and quite a intense description of his childhood there. Oh, there's a bit more on the next page. That very long ribbon of flesh also bore, embroidered with memories, our furibund game of war with two armies of schoolchildren, all armed with a crusader cast iron shield, the bloody machine gunning of padded leather balls, and the cheerful 30-year-old Jesuits who, wet with sweat, with rolled up sleeves and black cassocks, raged on their free legs, make running attacks, counterattacks, pursuits, and whirling fights. So again, there's an allusion to the futurist love of violence and war there. A floating chapel of English sailors. Meanwhile, another nostalgic thread of my flesh was twisting in front of my dreamy eyes. My brother Leones, line plunging into the already dark water of the port of Alexandria, under the sinking white sunburst of the already set sun. My brother was fishing. I was dreaming of hating fishing. The Sudanese servant in white galabia prepared the bait. From time to time, my little boat struck the grey and gloomy keel of the floating sailors' chapel boat, whose leftward lids never revealed to us in so many afternoons the shadow of a crew of devotees. Another shred of my flesh had the sour honeydew and pungent smell of gaggy flowers, spraying out of the angles of the Antoniadis garden to provoke the chaste and blind water of the Mahmoudiya Canal to crest its black buffalo to the hut of cattle and camel dung. 10 miles from Alexandria, with the slow rolling of the ship, the undulating bluish mercury of the sea rose and fell on the thermometer of the window. Magically, the sea horizon was crested with palm trees, our bow lowered, adorning itself with water. Every now and then the sea on the right offered to be cut of the bow, its edge of the grey dunes, so that the projected beam of the sun, shining down from the slits of the clouds, bleached and sugar-coated its peaks. He's really making it sound like a magical mystery land in Egypt. King Fuad. An hour later, in the dark garden of Villa Ambron, I fused my soul with the large Fiscus elastica, whose weeping leaves would plant green memories in the earth, eager to revive new salient green memories. With the same calm and sure pace the next day, in the palace of Cairo, King Fuad illustrated to me the systematic and rapid progress of Egypt. As I listen to him, I think of the Muslim affinity for the fez, abolished by Kemal Pasha in Turkey because it generates passive moods. Of all the headdresses, the fez is the least likely to assume a warrior or royal character. That of King Fuad blends its sloping lines with the sensual curves of a perfect oval. A sinuous mouth smiles under a hooked moustache that still reminds one of the sultans on horseback under the double arc of the scimitar and the moon. With the gestures of a landlord to his fief, but without the typical grey silk parasol, he now glorifies the new maritime city that multiplies its shining neighbourhoods of marble, crystal, electricity, neon to the palm grove of Victoria, the reclaimed lakes, the swollen markets of fabrics, jewellery, and pastry shops, already gutted by mechanical speeds, the concentrated indolence of the Arabs in the trams that seem to kidnap them away into the sea. The stubborn pressing of smells, the Arabs heroically defend themselves against European modernity in the boroughs of Cairo. I said to myself, I will no longer greasily savour the fresh, meaty oysters of my 15 years amidst the lopsided turquoise wooden cabins of the small Ramleh bathhouse that shook with every wave of its iron poles. I will no longer have in my eyes and nostrils that sea of beautiful green crystal, which my father had brutally thrown my little baby body to teach me to despise life jackets. A Congress of Music from the Orient. Suddenly King Fuad changed his tone, perhaps sensing the tragic struggle that was taking place in my veins, between that groaning past and the magnificent future that strangled him. His Majesty's energetic gestures and voice took on a regal Muslim gravity to collect all his scattered nostalgia. Today, I attended an interesting concert of Egyptian music. Next winter, I'll organise and chair the first major Arab music congress here in Cairo. All the composers, all the travelling musicians, and all the improvisers of Islam will be summoned with their instruments. We will discuss the best way to develop the musical genius of our races, preserving the old artistic traditions and at the same time arousing new creative originalities. While King Fuad spoke, his hand searched with feminine delicacy in the air for the lost echoes of the beautiful songs of the past, the wandering voices of the muezzins of the shepherds and sailors' caravans. He certainly wanted to merge them all into a harmonious synthesis that was both artistic and political. With the most inspired Arabic music, was it not possible to seduce and enchant the greedy, grim-armoured Europe, who too lovingly gazed upon rich and contemplative Egypt? With a delicious Egyptian chant, sighed first with the mouth closed, then carried up by a very sad nasal voice, suspended and resumed 20 times, it will certainly be possible to move and finally dissolve the hard and knotty problem of the Suez Canal, already encumbered by too much paper imposed by the League of Nations. While taking care, as a sage king, to fight every day the cocaine trade that tries to corrupt his beloved villages, he dreams of pacifying with art the ambitions of his people, who have nothing and thus could abruptly tear everything apart with suicidal violence. Again, the allusion to the sort of primal violence and discord within the Magian soul. And I find it interesting, this allusion to cocaine trade in Egypt. I mean, I knew the Orient had especially within the Islamic world, there was a tendency to consume hashish because it's believed it could connect you to the spiritual world. But I never knew cocaine was a problem back then. So that's another consequence of modernity. Speed of the Italians. King Fuad adds, the Italian colony is admirable for its intelligence, industriousness, and speed. This sentence suddenly reawakens in my visionary heart the iron life of my father, one of the first lawyers who landed 60 years ago in a muddy Alexandria without gas or drinking water, who traversed it every night clutching a lantern to attend to the intricate deliberations of the pot-bellied pasha, who called him Felfel with that speed of a superior acumen. King Fuad concludes, I have a filial affection for the House of Savoy. Queen Margaret was a real mother to me, and my beautiful Turin, I have a great friendship for your great foreign minister, a worthy disciple of the Duce. Of course, this being in the 1930s, that's a reference to Mussolini. Then in the atmosphere of sing-song, palms, dunes, pyramids, and Arab villages, the proud and joyous vision of the homeland, an island impatient to sail, electrified by the orders of the chief, and the tireless fervour of the crews erupting in a continuous fusillade. The next day I boarded the train to go to Alexandria, smothered by memories. The first to break in my hands, like a fragile old toy, was the French Jesuit College of Saint Francois Xavier, now transformed into the Governorate Guardhouse. Anxious to wash my soul with the latest nostalgia, I raced to the grid of the Antoniadis garden. The sun of that languid Egyptian December noon tried and tried again its most meticulous caresses of my futurist skin. But the fiery and sensual gaggle flowers of my adolescence were gone. Instead of a strong smell of tar, came into my nostrils from the keel of a boat loaded with cotton. That wilful tar, trafficking in danger and adventures, invaded my brain and forced me to raise my head. Beyond the edges of the enchanted garden, a very high order of palms, with a metallic tuft, geometrically indicated the route to the Italian postal plane. With a groaning but tenacious hum of a warlike bee, a device flies over me, a black war flute, musically wounded the azure sky, had for wings the severed hands of his musician abandoned on earth. Really has a way with words, Marinetti. I do hope to read more of his stuff one day. I just don't know how much it's been translated into English, other than this and the Futurist Manifesto. Armies of palms producing new images. After speaking with the Sultan, I went immediately to consult the palms of the Nile and the whirling dervishes. It was an exhaustive audition from the lyrical, sculptural, and musical point of view. The Commissioner Grassi, one of those Italians who dominate the East with their strong and simplifying intelligence, offered me the getaway speed to avoid the tedious nostalgia of my illustrious interviewees. By bus from Alexandria to Cairo, I reviewed the tribal people's armies of palms. With their animal-like trunks that are almost human and always lacking in vegetation, they impose themselves as the lords of the plain. They conclude it. Disorganized groups, clustered battalions, lookouts, philosophers veiled in meditating solitude. Over there, a palm staff commands an invisible battle. Others adored the sun and waited for a shower of gold with their fluffy tufts. On the horizon, they marched like herds of elephants. I questioned an old palm tree bent by agricultural labours. It didn't answer me. My train was sliding over Egypt, flat, green, the blackish and grey villages of bovine mud, straw, and camel dung, baking in the sun are its crusts and growths, dark buffaloes are its boils. The earth seems to hold everything crushed and glued to its chest. Huts, trained dead waters and slow currents with old papyrus sails, and a vast and empty sky that the angry Nile will perhaps one day colonize us with its unstoppable force. Again, ultimately, despite the physical modernity, everything always goes back to nature ultimately. The thoughts of a buffalo. Like a thief pursued, the train skims a banana grove thick with live emeralds and dripping with gold fringes. The canals draw high arched sails that look like knives. Camels and traders harmonize their curves with those of the villages, all pregnant and overflowing with fertile plains. The train rhythmically churns out its clumps of soot. The wagon slows down, my body sways, entangling itself among the flies and in the warm, wet breath of a crouching buffalo, which, like a large turtle, pulls its head from the immense muddy shell of the plain to watch over a drunken crowd of white Arab tombs. The buffalo ruminates, I am the daughter of black earth and the grey Nile. Lying down, I look like a mound of silt. I sculpt myself in getting up, and immediately my rump and my horns continue to the profile of the low roofs, overflowing with straw, brats, rags, kids, oven domes, smokeless earth pipes. I love stillness, just a few steps from the rails in the road. I do not raise my muzzle at the passage of the trader, who, sitting atop the undulating camel, stares at me without seeing me, and not worthy of a glance, with neither a goal to reach nor a care for countryside that smells strongly behind him. He will never again breathe a germ-rich atmosphere like mine. The air is volatilized silt. It presses your cheeks like a warm sponge. The long silvery robes, sweeping the black paths or the bright green of the meadows, incense the sky with good earth. Meanwhile, the blue was red hot, and scattered silver clouds appeared more and more lit, and were suspended like lamps above an invisible divinity presented to the water. With anxiety for light, for stones you shine thirstily. Hunting for quails and Arab women with a half Arab. Cafe El Zayat, this name brutally tears my soul from reality. 1933, and it plunges into my 20s with the colour of light and fluffy joy. 30 years ago, the darkness smelled of mummies when the train stopped at the Cafe El Zayat station, a small wooden shed wrapped in banana trees on the banks of the invisible Nile. Mohammed El Rajel, the pimp of the British General Staff, who had been warmly recommended to me by Sir Ward, was waiting to take us to the hunting convention and to do us the erotic hot honours of the village. I still see it in my memory as it were yesterday, noisy and ceremonious, bowing, reaching out to us, moving our fingers nimbly to our mouths, shouting imperious orders to our two negroes who were carriers of provisions. The great slouching porter seduced us all from the first moment. Nice chocolate-coloured face, big black eyes, placid, clever, and hooked of nose. Mohammed strode ahead of us, making the black ribbon of his fez dance, and showed us the way with his majestic gesture. He certainly looked very noble in his waving robes of black crepe, half open over a tight-fitting silk tunic with canary yellow and pistachio green stripes. We were 10 passionate hunters, 3 Greeks, 5 English, and 2 Italians, all eager to kill at least 100 quail far from Alexandria, rendered uninhabitable by the Bahram festivals. Cubic huts first appeared to us on both sides of the road, huts almost entirely built with Nile mud, yellowish and surrounded by tiny gardens, then palm groves loomed on the dawning horizon. A sad, tired, and disillusioned dawn. Deathly silence was poured out over the gloomy countryside. Slowly the sky was streaked with greenish silver. Beyond the cultivated fields, the undulation of the sands was delicately coloured purple with the caresses of the waning moon. A warm and soft moon, the colour of yellow rust, fell like a drop of gold towards the distant sea. Plantations of banana trees choked the road, and we felt delightfully bathed in the fragrant freshness of its scent. A Bedouin tent bit into the pallor of the sky, appearing in the distance like a huge vampire with parchment-like wings spread and nailed to the ground. With curiosity, I studied the bizarre geometry of his patched canvases, his harlequin frills of dirty ochre and rust, which rounded off in the desert wind like old ship hulls. In front of the opening of the tent, a small hedge of branches and pieces of tin, and some goats of disgusting thinness, which ramped limp and distended udders. A mangy, scathed skeletal dog ran towards us angrily. That was the tent of Abdel el Rajel, Mohammed's brother. Saidi Abdul, shouted our guide. Saidi ya Mohammed, answered a voice from inside. And Abdul appeared from behind the hedge, He had a bold and severe profile, a great white wool cloak draped over his chest. His gesture was solemn. His appearance was both stately and gypsy-like. The two brothers had a long, whispered conversation between them, in which I could distinguish only the name of Fatma repeated several times. Sir Ward had talked to me a lot about Fatma, the most beautiful woman in the whole East, and he had also told me of her husband, Mustafa El-Bar, a skilled hunter, condemned by misery and jealousy to practice the sad profession of a pimp of the Nile. Oh dear, oh dear. He was, it was said, an implacable enemy of Mohammed for certain odd stories which I had forgotten. We said goodbye to Abdul and set off again along the road that had become sandy through the desolate countryside. It was an absolute camel carcass. At about 6, we came to a cluster of palm trees on the beach. The slate-coloured sea gradually turned pink. Sitting on our folding seats 10 metres from each other, we waited with the common understanding of shooting only towards the sea, where the quail were about to come. Mohammed, with his legs crossed in the sand, began to dig a large hole. He wanted me to see the heat of the sun concentrated under the ground. At 6:30, a rustle of wings and the first quail, thrown like fireballs, swooped down in front of us. They were drooped from exhaustion. The first shots failed. You couldn't see enough of each other. In the intervals of the flight, Mohammed would frolic curiously, a short distance from me, sparing imaginary quail with a long stick, smacking his lips and shouting, "Shoof! Look, shoof, Pam, Pam." He showed heroic or languid postures with aspirated hisses and grunts of pleasure. We continued to hunt at 9. Some half-naked urchins came to offer us, for our paltry amount of coin, baskets full of figs, which were fresh and sugary. The sun was rising as the heat grew. The flies became furious. The sands now looked like ash. Mohammed skillfully made us fans out of palm leaves, then began to recite La Fontaine's fables. I still remember his nasal voice and his childish and bizarre gestures to imitate beasts. On our return, we skirted the Nile, flowing oily and yellowish between the shores felted with green. Among certain twisted figs and certain palm trees, I was amazed to discover a grown vine in the sand. Mohammed explained to me that the grapes of that plant are delicious, due to the organic matter deposited in that soil by the shells. The shadow of the palm tree is minimal. It is noon. We see the village, the small shimmering crowd of huts and walls. Here and there, dressed in branches of green, it appears to me immobilized, parched under the flames of the sun. The landscape is exhausted and melted from the heat. Mohammed leads us down a muddy ladder to an underground system of fresh blue water. As we descended, a woman in a blue robe passed us. She walked slowly up the slippery steps, carrying a dripping black jug on her head, holding up her arms to support her. With each step, her hips swayed and her small, round and hard breasts were drawn taut under the fabric. Steady on, Filippo. He stared languidly at us through her black rubber pupils, which almost covered her golden irises. Her mouth was hidden by a black cloth, tied to the veil of her head by a little harp that passed through a copper tube resting on her nose. We followed her, but Mohammed stopped us with a nod. Under the blazing sun, with cautious gestures and a finger to his mouth, he promised us the wonderful Fatma for that very evening when her husband would be gone. The eyes of the beautiful Arab, those gazelle eyes, haunted me all the day in the winding, stinking alleys, all buzzing with large green flies. I confess that Fatma's prostitution worried me. I anticipated a repugnant debate about the price and all the banality of a princely paid coitus. If I could have met the beauty or seen her in some window, I would have combined things in a more romantic way. I therefore explored as I passed the doors like entrances to dens on which reddish fumes of nauseating fritters and the stench of excrement issued. Suddenly I seemed to recognise her, on the threshold of a small house so low that the hens could jump from the terrace into the street. It wasn't her. I was left alone. I had detached myself from my friends at the last crossroads, and my anguish was growing. On a small square, blind rhapsody soured the fiery silence, humming lullabies accompanied by the yelp of fifes. After an atrocious breakfast, eaten quickly in a small Greek cafe, I went out from the village, now resigned to not see Fatma again before it was high night, to contemplate the sunset on the sands. My friends called me from the top of the terrace. They were in the house of certain relatives of Mohammed, and he gave them, with many bows, the honour of his hospitality. There they were, richly offered some brandy from Chios, preserved in a tarred goat skin. In the alley in front of us, a quiet little bar smelled of aniseed liquor and absinthe. Some large negroes passed by, dressed in white, who had bunches of jasmine on their ears and under their turbans. A few women passed, all veiled and mysterious. Among them I tried to discover Fatma. My friends ate crumbly pomegranate seeds, sweets which smelled of roses, spicing them up with a honeyed lemonade full of pistachios. It was dark, beyond the houses with flowered terraces. The sunset dripped with an incandescent lava. the sands burned. Then slowly, as the night breeze blew, the flames and heat waves subsided. The landscape is velvet with amethyst, and the sun, dying, drips in liquefied and tasty gold that made me think of a hive dripping with honey. A distant island of vegetation appeared among the metallic and precious sands. Like an emerald circled in gold, Mohammed bowed to the west with one hand to his forehead to ward off the evil spirits of the night. On a terrace, an old man with a white beard, dressed in blue, unrolled a small mat, and from time to time, standing with his feet together bent double, kneeling face down, face to the ground, and said his prayer to Allah, facing the west. Women also went up to the neighbouring terraces. When the moist mother of pearl moon rose above the cottage opposite, Mohammed waved at me, squinting, and we followed him through the village. He had put some violets in his nostrils as a sign of joy. We stopped in front of a group of four disjointed and oblique houses, whose terraces sloped down in a bizarre and pleasant disorder. They looked like four odd witches in plaster and limestone, immobilized in an evening council. In the middle of those houses there was a courtyard. Mohammed entered through a shadowy portal and came out shortly afterwards, followed by a small and fat woman with her head and mouth veiled. She had a flowing robe under which, one could guess with repugnance, sat long and drooping breasts. Thanks for the image, Filippo. She was Fatma's mother. I walked over to her. Copper rings jingled at her ankles and wrists. Shortly after, a murmur reached us from inside. A few women, followed by a ragged mob, surrounded Mohammed. They all screamed, gesticulated, raising to the sky coffee and milk-coloured arms, covered with reddish tattoos and jingling bunches of bracelets. Fatma's price was discussed. I dragged Mohammed inside to cut short these negotiations. The already high moon violently illuminated the wall that closed the courtyard at the end, but the family followed us and the dispute began again. It was dismal and strange in the luxurious scenery of the moonlight edged shadows, the tumult of that dishevelled family that was laughing at the price of the girl of the house. Provided that Mustafa, her husband, does not appear suddenly, Mohammed told me, and the price was fixed. The mother left us to look for her daughter. Mohammed nimbly climbed a ladder to the highest of the four terraces. He wanted to spy on the possible return of her husband. Standing with his hands in visors, he sang in a monotone, "You have, Ilat, your flesh is sweet. Your flesh is sweet as banana. Your flesh is pearlescent like the moon, but the moon is cold, and your breasts burn under my kisses. Eli, Eli, your flesh is sweet." Standing up there, overlooking the sleepy village nestled on the bank of the Nile, Mohammed sang and explored the river, whose vast oily waters flowed heavily. Here and there, those waters seemed sumptuous velvets bitten by the silver buckles of the moon. On the Nile there was not even a lone boat, but very high on the edge of a cloud. The moon was grinning, a vicious plastered face with eyes rimmed with bluish trim. Over Mohammed's head curved a graceful silver sky, and intimate and artificial was the skies of certain ancient panel paintings. All around there was an indefinable buzzing of insects and the meow of a distant song on the river. I do not remember at all the pleasures that the beautiful Fatma gave me. She was an ordinary woman. Mohammed continued to sing under the moon, "Eli, Eli, your flesh is sweet." The room was filthy, the basin was yellowish and cracked, and that down door that was constantly being reopened. And say that I had longed for those delights. Suddenly a shot and a heartbreaking cry. In the moonlight, Mohammed was no longer singing, and the thud of a heavy body on an upper floor, perhaps on the terrace. I rushed out into the courtyard where there was an indescribable tumult. The women cried mournfully, "Mustafa killed Mohammed, Mustafa killed Mohammed." The mob howled, terrified. I elbowed my way to climb up the ladder and went up to the highest terrace. Mohammed lay face down in a pool of blood. I tried to lift the body. It was already cold and too heavy. It was not possible for me to carry it. In the courtyard, my friends were in awe as some Arabs have come to say that Fatma's husband Mustafa wanted to kill everyone. But he made no other victims. He walked past me without ever looking at me. He had killed Mohammed because he had not paid him, the last time, the price of Fatma's prostitution, or Mohammed El Regal. Well, Mohammed, you should have paid for your pussy there. And that was quite a lengthy section. I think the rest aren't as long as that. Eating in Dahabieh, I blessedly examined the Nile. Finally, at the station of Cafe El Zayat, bundled up with carts, noise, galebia, and shacks, I discovered the Nile in its tortuous opulence of turbid green, a mirror fluidity that brings Maonas armed with very high antennas. There emerged beaks of giant shipwrecked flamingos. Here in the sailing procession of His Majesty, the Cotton with its monumental leaded bales. Going down the great merchant river in the colour of buffalo crocodile and brown London cloth, before crossing the sea and changing into European clothes. The steam plume flowered and embroidered a spiral flight of white pigeons. The dahabeah that carries me looks like a little blue house that has slipped off the shore in its sleep. Under the tarred keel, the Nile speaks. You slept motionless, now sleep sailing. If my march bores you, I offer you the steps of my bank so that you may go up to the golden peace of the sky. There are very long steps carved by water in the brackish hallelujah of silt. The dahabeah drops anchor in the garden of Gesireh. At the table with distant sails nearby garlanded with white steam, we drink a liquid sun in the large square windows. Negroes attend to us, charcoal faces with solar sparkles, and the dazzling galabeahs in the belts of flame. The dazzling Nile, which measures 700 metres wide at this point and 1,000 metres beyond the island, is draped by distant grey mists bristling with scissor antennas. They invite me to race, and I chase them while sipping a Turkish coffee on a motorboat. With sinuous languor, the river reveals to me above its bed of black earth and green grass the desert. Dunes, yellow solidification of a music of sand and wind-driven pulses, crescendo and arpeggiated cadences, dying on the sly and very sweet shore. And just a comment from AI Shaitori, nasty way to go. Yes, AI, that was a very nasty way to go. You do lesson learned. Do not be killed over a prostitute. What if the sands arise? Prudently, the sand raises and rounds a large white sail of mist, like a skirt in the sun, to defend its sweet water face from the flame. My speed accelerates the magical elevation of the other white sails. This, very slow, seems like a grand white prayer of the adoring river, lying face down. Open your canvas arms, swell with ecstasy. The sail rises, sure to appease the solar ferocity, and soon obtain a fresh adamantine peace in the stars. Sailors doze off, sailing in the shade, lying on the pyramidal load of the hull, immersed to the brim. The instinct of the prow comes alive. Behind comes the long black rudder, useless as a train of mud, the babble of the Nile. Slowly I fatten the friendly earth, but my daughters of cloth in the wind swell the cheeks of the holy breath of Allah, mixed with stars, and blow it back into the windows of the goldsmiths of the burrows. Like a magic pump, the tough of the motorboat brings forth on the left horizon, above the green Cairo gardens, along 100-metre high, lilac-pink Mokattam Plateau, and atop the jewel-like citadel, with slender minarets and domes of flesh drinking in the sky. My friend Grassy sensed my desire and converted it into reality, taking me at a grueling speed through the neighbourhood of the dead to the tombs of the dervishes, Abdullah el Magawi. The sacred mechanism. With fury, we skim the walls of the citadel. Tall, perpendicular, desert-coloured stone jackets, rigid folds and black mouths of English cannons in the gunwale. At the foot of the Mokattam Plateau, a staircase takes us under the observatory room of the chief of the dervishes. A small courtyard of pine trees and dusty cypresses. With our feet wrapped in cloth, we enter the large cavern cave carved into the limestone. Tombs left and right in the background in a square of mats closed by the iron grids. 3 Arabs all wrapped in black, lying down with their feet turned towards the entrance, roll like typographic rollers to ink themselves with fecundity. Outside on the terrace, planted with eucalyptus, crouched or seated on the marble, the dervishes in long black dress with grey berets wrapped in white were contemplating, with prominent heads accentuated by the green of their hats and fly-swatter necks, pointing far above the English powder magazine, above the stripes and thorny bulbs of the domes of the dead, above the Nile flowing between green gardens, the orange splendour of the pyramids, 3 perfect geometric shapes, each with its falling shallow triangle like a cloak fixed on the occiput. A clamour of machines calls me back to the sacred cave. Like tops, the dervishes spin, arms outstretched. The white tunic and skirt flare in the rotational movement. A mystical, imploring naivete melts the emaciated face that looks like the vault. Up there, as the holy engine vibrates and hums, 15 lathes of the greater stellar steel mill are now in operation, filing the earth, smoothing the rougher surface. The tall grey unbowed caps pierce the hard air. From time to time, like oil, a plaintive drop player drips over them, pacifying the rusty snag of Arab musical instruments. The ragged, crowded orchestra screeches, lets it imitate the rhythms of the universe, remechanized to human gears of the cosmic order. A human love stops. 2, 5, sweaty. An exhausted one crouches next to me on the mat. The most ambulatory go to get to the burn houses of their old companions, cover them lovingly, then all cross-legged begin to pray. Only then do I see the chief, the only one left on the mat, while the others have turned away. His grey cap sits on his ashen face while he listens to the prayer. He gets up. They follow suit with a long siren hue, as if in the Frog of the Thames. The Bardotti by Her Majesty the Cotton. A crowd of ragged Arabs, green, yellow, and blue, observes the painful screeching of pivots and cogwheels on an iron bridge that's turning slowly, permits passage of high sails through the sky and muddy riverbed stretched on long taut ropes. I observe a sleepwalking crowd, stunned by the light, still all smoky and filthy from its chocolate-coloured villages, low winding silt hovels, cattle, goats, dogs, hens, reeking of gaudy groups of roosters and black buffaloes, pointing their horns against suspended washed Majolica sky. Crammed in the lock basin, the boats are anxious to carry a load of crude cotton, moaning, grumbling, creaking with rage in that European trap. With a heavy and rhythmic step, four black, beggarly, half-naked sailors advance, infinitely occupied, curved, digging the mud or staring at it endlessly. They tighten the rope to drag the huge half-sunken sailing ship some distance under a millionaire load of cotton that crushes the torrid sacks of seeds. These already ripen the future fibre whiter, shinier, longer. A little black man who bites into a piece of sugarcane commands its navigation astride the tiller. Cotton boats besiege a small Arab cemetery on the shore, whose grey graves with stalks, turbans, and algarve swords descend to bathe in the Nile. Naval rattles and lullabies resound in the warm wool of the atmosphere. On the shiny rails, a snorting steam train manoeuvres, warning with a sign, beware of trains. Black rats are colonized by flies, and the sun is already high. The wide, round, white smoke of the locomotive incenses a blue minaret, its blue-clad muezzin and its blue cry launched to the four winds. Allah Akbar. Hawks circle above in a halo, winged scavengers jealously watching over the carcass of a dog, whose stench softens the acrid aromatic smoke of an oven built with bricks of camel dung cooking in the sun. I really appreciate his contrast between the sort of mysterious nature of Egypt and then the sort of the intrusive European modernity and mechanized sort of contraption of the boat. Resistant hacks of fresh fat and sterile glass. An acute sensuality makes my lips and nostrils hot. My nerves, which over time have coated the wheels of my car, transmit to me the various tactile pleasures of the tyres. Fat road of black earth and mud, fleshy, greasy, saturated with germs, the flanks lie down into the low country expanse of murky ponds, skeletal norias tortured by skeletal horses, bronze buffaloes set in the emerald of the meadows, ecstatic ibises and flying slivers of pigeons. Suddenly, my nail-oiled skin trembles at the edge of a new tactile world, all dry, glassy, metallic, the desert. I enter the sultry padding of the horizon of sand. Saqqara, centrally my parched hands enjoy the humidity of the sweaty rump under the saddle. The atmosphere is arid. Preciously, a drop of sweat shines like a perfect pearl on the forehead of my companion, who looks like the Queen of Sheba, among the painting, noisy, brackish bootishness of the donkeys. They trot like children on the infinite mattress of sand, his succulent and fleeting tenderness. Thinking malaise of the desert. The desert is the inhuman heart of the globe. Of course, with the agile and fragile legs of donkeys, we unravel the skein of his coldest and most mysterious feelings. The sand lives and thinks but does not want to talk. Monotonous, absent, and distracted, the dunes neither say nor give anything to man. Leading us through a wrinkled path, it welcomes us in silence. A tremendous silence pervades the underground Serapeum with its granite sarcophagi, which contain the sacred oxen. Yet with the utmost care they have been soaked into aromatic plants, golden poultices, gems, and papyrus. This was a mistake, since human rapacity and curiosity succeeded in overcoming and dispersing their immortal cohesion. But with what levels of audacity, muscles, and iron were the robbers ever able to lift or break those enormous tomb covers? Certainly the bellowing curses of that castle, full of so much artificial life, must have struck them all into the sand, as a faithful guardian furtively captured the escape of their nocturnal steps. So much is felt and seen, rising from the thickness of the desert, like long black rays, the tenacious wheels that buzz like dynamos in the foreheads and in the chests of those kings, warriors, and magistrates, crocodiles, and sacred oxen. They truly live in the real permanence of their portraits of gold, silver, copper, stone. The burning pyramid. So intoxicated with renewed earthly joy, we left those dunes and grays full of life for the soft silt road, as one comes out of a hard ascetic bed to slip into a perfumed tub. The muddy heads of the camels float in the afternoon air as they drunkenly sweep against our car with their large load of sugar canes and corn leaves. The most heavily burdened show only their legs, undulating twigs on the march. A black man draws water from a well with the pail, reminding me of my thirst. and I come parched into the immense yellow flame that vibrates on the face of the Pyramid of Giza. It bums all the way up, anxiously built up from 3 roads to reach the sun. I rise up and meet at the luminous peak. Religiously, I visit the base to ascertain the human height of each block. Then I detach myself from it. A gigantic rump, turned tail, and elongated back brick pawns of the Sphinx offer meagre carpets of shade. In one of these, 11 Arabs, donkeys, and guides coagulate in the blackish spot around the puddle of water, a few onions, and a flat, battered pizza. A second group came. They were dark and in clear splendor. An Egyptian family has lunch on the sand. I see the sweet transparency of the black veil on those very black eyes, and an anachronistic fur collar on that European silk-dressed table. A Cartoonese caretaker carries a coal-black baby between rigid folds of whitish raw wool. He wraps the body and masks her face. When he gets up, his hard and heavy gait erases the footprints of his bare feet in the sand. The sun bites the folds of the mistress's black mask, which also hides her nose. Her gold bracelets tinkle. I hear the zizz-zizz of an elegant Parisian tailstock dancing on the eternal rough granite. I perceive the tub of the turtle doves and pigeons on the broken nose of the Sphinx. Distantly, I can hear the low of the donkey in a distant palm grove. To eat an entire pyramid. I'm hungry. We'll eat soon at the Miana Hotel. Meanwhile, the scolded pyramid escapes all coloristic definitions: old, gold, orange velvet, solidified rosy flame. There's nothing nostalgic about it, nothing eternal. It does not teach, it does not rule. Rather, it offers itself to be eaten immediately on the table, or rather in its sumptuous desert set. The scent of its ivory colories sinuously seeks my nostrils. Its crust cracks with the reflections of the immense, skillful solar oven. Cooked to perfection, I click my tongue in my mouth involuntarily. It is no coincidence that distant palms repeat the ceremonious greetings of their tufts. Above those dunes that magically change into domes inlaid with almonds and walnuts, the sky is sweet and oily white, like the best mastic preserves, that in which the adored child of the most brilliant confectioner in Egypt fell and died. In the growing shadow of the Sphinx, I forget the breakfast at the Miana Hotel, and I doze off chewing a delicious piece of pyramid. When I woke up, the shadows were marching through the desert like a dark army. The Pyramid of Giza appears to me entirely built of crystallized pistachios. I ate some more, foreseeing what happened on my return to Cairo. When turning around at speed, I saw it recomposed in the ancient romantic visions. Already it was floating in the reddish gold liquid of a Victor Hugian sunset. On the right, the white flowered stem of a minaret and the very high tuft of a palm were diluted like 2 tablets of oblique peace in the silvery water of twilight. At midnight at the Semiramis Hotel, the breath of the Nile gently opened my window. In the void, the round moon rested lightly on the open foliage of a banana tree. The nocturnal birds barked, calling each other, for it was stolen from me. I ate the moon, convinced that the appetite is always right. I have become enchanted by this exciting competition of Arab sweets. A walk with my mother on the beach on the ancient port. On one of those typical Egyptian January afternoons, so slow, soft, ecstatic, and golden, I went to visit Constantine of Cavaphy, the famous Greek poet who prefers his native Alexandria to his distant, distracted Athens. The brilliant Italian publicist, Catraro, spoke eloquently about it. While I was picking around and evaluating the reasons for historical nostalgia that can link the soul of a poet to the blue semicircle of the Porto Antico, now deserted but certainly cluttered with sumptuous invisible galleys. This was my mother's favourite evening walk, on which I accompanied her while trying to harmonise my dreaming steps with her determined and hasty ones. She seemed to be pursuing her painful regret. I was magnetised by the flames of the sunset, which, as a master of war and heroism, scenographically tried and retried all the possible battles of clouds, purple cavalry, rifles shooting collapses of castles of gold, etc. We were assailed by the biting stench of the great slaughterhouse, purple hovels besieged by piles of bloody fleece, heaps of rubbish, and angry bellowing. My nostrils recall the horrendous breath of death, omnipresent in that sinister landscape of smells, among the shadows of the ghostly cattle that frightened the feet of Arab passers-by, and black skirts and slippers along the shining water. Now the great slaughterhouse no longer exists. A wide paved quay, defended by concrete blocks, allows us to reach the Roman ruins of the Celle outcrop in the blue sea without shocks. Fresh, flying salt of bitter memories, gaseous rustles of foam, which excited my dives as a young swimmer. We are 2 ebony profiles against a bright sky of white gum, standing on the pink nail of the hand of one of the 2 arms of the Portico Antico. The other pushes the Caed Bay fort into the high seas, an old whitish and fragile building, which of course the visionary eye of Catherby does not see, since the ancient lighthouse wonder of the world stands up in its place. Let's go home, Tom, my mother said. Let's go back, I say now to my companion. Immediately, the murky sunset changes into the great slaughterhouse of the past. Steaming reddish guts collapse down, incinerating the emerald leaves and pearls of a banana grove. At the Carrioy crossroads, I encounter the geometric comings and goings of the English century, and steps of the Mohammed Ali Club, perhaps observed by myself as a child, still sensitive to the bars of the balcony of my eternal home. In this clamour of schoolchildren and roosters of today, or of them, higher than the minaret and muezzin already absorbed by the night, a palm tree blesses us on the threshold of the poet Cathy. I do have to say, I really appreciate sort of Marinetti's, the intense nostalgia he feels for his childhood and all the comparisons he's drawing from his youth to the sort of later visit he's made in the 30s. I think it's always good to sort of reconnect with your past, and especially the place where you grew up, especially if it's somewhere very special and exotic like Egypt. The Greek-Egyptian poet Cathy. Here it is, a small grey head of a sweet, intelligent tortoise, slender arms that hang like oars out of the immense Greco-Roman shell of this wise old shade, with dark red velvet walls and paintings that reign pulverized centuries. Also dark red are the gold-decorated shorts of the Sudanese servant, who hands me a whiskey and soda, and the traditional Greek cheese meze over the sania. Chewing he like an Arcadian shepherd boy, I like a running flyer. We start a discussion on the poetry of tomorrow. Cathy praises the futurist movement, declaring its symbolic interpretation of historical phases applied to poor daily life hygienic. He adds, this interpretation must be verbalized about the old meters and without the rhyme in the free verse. I replied that it is necessary to surpass the free verse and reach the simultaneity of the words in freedom that best express our great vast mechanical civilization. The conversation rises, other admirers participate, everyone praises the original poet who hosts us. It is shown with examples that the Greek poet Palamas, Cathy's rival, resembles Victor Hugo's for his verbal abundance and Lamartine for his sentimentality. Malakassis is a blend of de Musset and Sully Prudhomme. Porphyras, the youngest of the Greek poets, sums up the Baudelaire and Verlaine. The sonnets of Criparis suggest those of Jose Maria de Heredia. Moved, the landlord offers me a new mez of cheese as he explains to me his desire to literally sculpt in his verses the demotic language that is popular Greek language exalted by the famous linguist Sycharis. This has a powerful vitality outside and against classical grammar, which rigidly traditionalist is now destined to die in libraries. The demotic language is dynamic. It lends itself to the welcoming all the indispensable foreign words, especially the Italian words. Cathy recites some verses where the words where hat, socks, gloves sound harmoniously, like necessary neologisms well blended, and shows me English, French, and Spanish equivalent words out of tune. We talk about the Ibsenism of the playwrights Xenopoulos and Nirvana. Spiro Melas, on the contrary, carries out an almost futuristic activity with his free scene, where the works of the French avant-garde thereafter are excellently interpreted by the company of Maria Kotopouli, the Duchess of Athens, according to the opinion of the major Greek daily Eleftheron Vima. I know that's all right, Yiz. I'm just reading and showing this wonderful book that Antelope Hill Publishing sent me as a review copy. And just very chill listening to Marinetti and reminisce on this the wonderful exoticness of Egypt. When finally Cathy, prayed to by everyone, decides to give us the declamation of one of his unpublished poems, Catrero intervenes to explain its mysterious title. The god abandons Antonio. In fact, we can read in Plutarch that while Antony was giving into the voluptuousness of Cleopatra in Alexandria, one evening a melodious chorus of mandolins and flutes was heard, moving away above the sea. All ran to the port beach, but they saw nothing. It was Dionysius, the protector of Antony, who abandoned his protege. Cathy slowly symbolizes his free lines, accompanying them with a gesture that was surreptitiously arabesque. Today, so many hands recall the languid weight of the music he sang. Catraro translates. If late at night, an invisible orchestra moves away, pouring around in voices and music, wonderful, the dying days of your fortune and your failed works, and the false desires of your life. Ah, do not hide from useless tears. What warrior who has been waiting for a long time? Such a fortune. Go to the extreme too. Salute to fugitive Alexandria. Neither deceive you. Do not say it was a dream. Do not say what evil you heard. Disdain such vain hope. What warrior who has been waiting for a long time? As it befits you, master of that city, proud as iron and bowed, leave out the cowardly lament, and throbbing listens, extreme joy. Listen to the melodies and the mystical orchestra. The beautiful instruments listen and give last farewell to Alexandria, the city you lose. Taking leave of the poet an hour later, I raced by car to enjoy the shadows scented with gaggy flowers in the Antionides garden. It was a full moon, surrounded by nightingales. In the ecstatic atmosphere, the colonnade of tall stone drips an immaterial milk. From time to time, a dull roar ended with thuds. They demolished the ancient villa, which is pregnant with memories, to improvise a very modern one intended for visiting European sovereigns. The rumble of trucks loaded with ancient marble. Sometimes the funeral collapse of the rubble evokes a hilarious burst of grenades. The Mahmudiya Canal is full of liquid nostalgic moons, much like the very modern and ancient three lines of the Greek poet of Alexandria, Constantino Cafefe. Well, it's very sad that that ancient villa is being demolished. No, it's the future destruction of the past. Death overcome. I tried to clarify the psychology of ancient and modern Egypt by studying the people when they move, semi-indifferent between the sacred and precious sarcophagus statues. The poet Nelson Morpurgo headed the Egyptian futurist movement. Well, I'm surprised there was an Egyptian futurist movement. Guides me in the Museum of Alexandria. We are alone with the past in the fragrant silence of warm wall, saltpeter and aromatic plants. A fugue of little voices, giggles, and the patter of restless feet breaks it. There is a crowd of schoolgirls, eyes wearing black scarves and veils, but their camellia white hands astutely touch and re-grab the huge rump of the ox Api, adored for its fecundating virtues. Just as the water of the Nile is drunk religiously, so too every young girl pretends or thinks she finds in that venerated stone the strength to create life. The Greeks and Romans paid little attention to this problem and often abandoned children. The Egyptians, on the other hand, despised and hated sterile women. It is now established that the sphinxes were scratched considerably to feed women with a paste of sure fecundity. This love of life crushed death itself under the weight of the complete and indestructible sarcophagus. The pride of the kings continued to rule peoples of mummies and undead in the sumptuous cavities of the pyramids, with a fervent human solidarity, by a dint of love and fraternity, and above all with the will to mock death, the sin morenti societies were organised. They were so happy to enjoy the whole life together that they wanted to prolong it together in the reign of the conquest of death. Before immortalising the body in salt-soaked bandages, they had fed it with meat from animals chosen for their special qualities of transfusion. The hard-working inedible ox, the ferocious and feared crocodile were deified. A Columbaea of Caravana shoes. This haunting ideology of immortality accompanies me as I visit El Azra University. I come to a large courtyard enclosed by arcades. Inside the mosque, I am lost in the high solar dust dome and minaret, which offers down the cool twilight of its mats. A certain beehive atmosphere teems under the numerous ogive arches. Around each gather about 20 scholarly groups. Each has about 30 students of every age. Each is adorned with a fez, enclosed in a red and white turban. Squatting, they listen around the bench on which the professor, sitting with his legs crossed, talks, waving his torso. School children imitate its oscillation, caught in the wind in the nasal chant of that internal commentary from the Quran. Concentric circles of whispers and silences form around the wise stone that swoops from time to time. The sweetest smell of food mixes with the perspirations of those bodies that adore the continuity of equal dispositions and ignore adventure. As we leave Al Azhar University, we notice a kind of wooden dovecote that contains students' shoes and slippers in its cells, and the nostalgic dust of all the streets of Africa and Asia that dyes them. Dialogues with the nearby Great Holy Niche facing Mecca. Therein lies the synthetic drama of silent objects that sums up the immense Islam. The English cannons of the citadel. If in the fast car I raise my head, the turreted, desert-coloured citadel immediately attempts with the tips of its minarets to pierce the annoying hum of English aviators, while continuing to philosophically aim its guns on the silent anguish of Muslim crowds. Against the limestone base of the walls, very ancient lines of camels, transporting stones for the construction of Europe, pass slowly, floating but appear carved into the edifice. We loudly run among the decapitated mosques, our speed barely disturbing the black kabar of the Arabs who, piled up in front of the prison, wait in the hay to visit their loved ones locked up by the foreigner. The Nile, still overcooked by the sun, Tahabia or floating houses sleep along the shore under palm trees drunk with sleep. They stand oblique, bracing themselves so as to not fall. The new garden of Gezereh, a great futurist cubist geometry of boxwoods cut into spheres of cubic cones, contains its large blue majolica, type of all the coolness dreams of its desert's journey. There stands the gorgeous smooth blue of the empty sky. How do they hope to mow down those high-arched sails between distracted palms and praying willows? Will Egyptian nationalism soon realise the dream of absolute autonomy and enter the League of Nations as a free ally and friend of England, that has always been the master of the Upper Nile and the bank of the Suez Canal? What contradictions! But do not the howls of desert jackals and domestic feral dogs harmonise with the fluid, nocturnal eternity of the Nile? Theatre without theatre. As many dramatic contrasts of images, ideas, colours, rhythms, voices, feelings should long ago have been given a literal place on the stage and formed into the Egyptian theatre, this, however, does not yet exist. This dawn will soon arrive. In addition to the European theatre translated into Arabic, which today constitutes the primary repertoire, there are plays by Yusuf Wabi, Mohammed Taimur, Antun Yazbak, Ibrahim. In March 1923, Yusuf Wabi founded his Ramses Company, which as a skilled capitalist boss and leading actor, he triumphantly brought all over Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, and Algeria. The historic theatre has its own poet, Skierki, the famous author of Cleopatra, and an actress, Fatma Marusk. This young, beautiful, intelligent, and sensitive artist passionately offers the Arab public, in addition to the languid modulations of her crying over Antonia's corpse, also an agile, voluptuous bare back, an authentic revolution in Muslim customs. The best actors are Zaki Telemat, Aziz Aid, Yusuf Wabi, George Abid. Among them all stand out Nigib Rihani, who created original scenes, Ramzi, Abdul Rahman Rushdie, Ibrahim El Masri, Mahmoud Kamel, Ismail Subri, Ali Labib. These actors try to create a typically national theatre in modern Egyptian, abandoning the classical language. There are erroneous efforts like that of the actor Zaki Talamat, who dreams of a theatre of historical magazines to offer to the Parisian public, and of another type, Kish Bey, the personification of the good-natured vulgar irony. The actor-author Ali Kassar manifests himself for the same caricature formula. An African simulation of a Negro aviator. Where am I? Upper Egypt? Tunisian interior? No, in reality, this car cuts the Tunisian plain, but at the same time divides Aswan from the Nile, which brings to the surface an elephantine hill like an immense pineapple. Now, pomegranates, banana groves, palm trees intensify with furious trunks and foliage in skeins under these wheels that run, at the same time break and loosen in the endless Tunisian plain, stirring it eccentrically. On my face, the dominating wind brutally blasts, moaning lessons against our rapid quarter notes. Bursts of yellow-green vineyards protect towards the arch of the horizon, each seeming to carry the ambitious triangle of a camel on its crest, which sullenly drags behind its small plough like a broken toy. Now he paints the vault of the sky with a raised muzzle. The thick hedges of a vineyard, like tangles of rusty fences, defend the invertebrate bat-like armour of the villages, whose tyres, buffalo donkeys, dogs, and muddy roosters live a fat brown like defended from the onslaught of the wind. Here, gradually swelling, the plain gives birth to Kairouan, white surrounded by agile and intricately articulated lacy walls, ovoid domes lined perpendicularly, similar to white juicy fruits, gracefully alternate with the grim square towers and minarets, loaded with war rather than prayers. From the balconies, the city seems to be an immense collection of empty boxes and heavy overturned lids, cropped with terraces of dusty silver, pocketed with bluish courtyards and velvety indigo alleys. I tower over the uncovered geometrical shapes of the desert, intestines, all cubes, spheres, triangles, cones and blisters, muscles and nerves, all calcified. High sparks of green gold flicker on the battlements of the walls that seem to be dripping with torrid blue milk. The hot atmosphere stuffs my legs and back with lead and warm wool as I slowly proceed through the deep and winding crematorium in the alley. A flat black tangle of fabric, perhaps a woman, is advancing, in the dust without noise. As she passes, her certainly looked at me from the small hole in the dark curtain. Even the theatrically on the left, packed in the shacks, a heap of Arabs or Bedouin, struck by sleep, cooked, boiled couscous, meat, bones, broad beans and sweets. All this seemed to perfection in a dazzling niche in the walls. The high inverted crater of the sun tumbles down the murderous lava that chases me into the trapdoor of a cellar cafe. Instead of the desired coolness, I receive in my nostrils stink flies and sickness of mold rancid with oil, cinnamon, vanilla, gaggia, carob, chickpea, sweat, incense, ammonia, anise, jasmine, and cloaca. Fortunately, a cub of vermain lubricates my choked brain between rinsing of cups and French Tunisian voice that narrates. The first part of the film I'm shooting takes place on the oily waters of the Nile in Dahabieh. The second between two mountains of cotton bales heated by the August sun. The third is Constantina. It is a crude and noisy city, a lot to do for the sound. Every morning we were awakened by the cheerful shouting of cattlemen, roosters, donkeys, goats, and oxen. A large hotel overlooking the inns of nomads whose large courtyards contain hay, garbage, dogs, camels, geese, pigeons. Elegant and absent-minded storks dominate the red tiles of the low roofs that seem to chew and squeeze the caravan to pleasant cattle and human rags as they pass. The view is splendid and lends itself to everything. We will obtain a powerful cinematic effect with the mass of lopsided and blue-flecked huts that bulge to the left badly, held by the round viaduct mounted on the slender arches. The capital scene will take place in the car, launched at high speed on this viaduct, that crosses the deep valley of the Rummel, ruffling the slow purple fumes that rise from the blue-brushed houses. Here it cracks, mutters the black aviator. Kairouan is the city of slow death in quicklime. I'm tired of cooking in oil like a pancake. You have to fly to the oases. Yesterday at dawn, I left Cairo with my little touring plane. I flew over Tripolitania and Tunisia and headed for El Kantara. While an aerial pantomime, two immense waves of limestone, granite, and sand, after floating in the sky in front of me during half-hour of flight, suddenly seemed to petrify their convulsive gullies. They wanted to bar me from entering the desert, but Hercules had for me, certainly for me, broken through that wall with his legendary football. I passed 100 meters high in the passage while 10,000 palm trees crowded into it, dynamiting the spinning gears of their tufts too anxious to escape the solar flame, and pulling all together like the stream of water of the paternal wadi that guides them. Towards Biskra, I flew over high parades of Bedouin farmers who go to work the land of others in order to work their own. I see the swaying of camels loaded with tents, crockery, children. At the top of the tallest, rich women swing under canopies of vermilion silk. Each one carries on her side the favourite white hen or the faithful sleeping white-furred dog. They seem like black bronze statuettes on pompous marching pedestals. Among the folds of the desert, flocks of white sheep are revealed by the red solferino that marks all their heads. Always in search of fresh sands, I finally found the blue Sarda Wadi with its emerald gardens between walls of orange limestone. You'll land in front of the El Kayed Hotel in a sunset of Sinkipilk sand. The hotel was full of tourists, and in the oasis under the brown Arab tent, lined with scarlet, you sleep badly. Without a beautiful Algerian by your side, the large stars in the crescent wait on the tufts of the palms, sleep fights against the quarrelsome howling of dogs, aided by the tinnitus of insects and nocturnal birds that groan and gnaw on their barks. But as soon as the moon disappeared behind the dunes, the delights of paradise invaded the oasis with a melodious breeze that set the infinite plumes of palm trees in motion, and these palms were all busy, kissing voluptuously, spreading a polyphony of the sweetest rustles and meandering illusory crackles. Watery ripples, perhaps rain and hail, despite my tiredness, my softened heart as I watched the only islet of that infinite ocean of blissful leaves. I flew off amidst the cries of slanting rays of a full sun, like a nest of red birds. On the lips of this metallic apparatus, the dawn was of vanilla strawberry ice cream. Wow, what a dawn that must have been. The tale of the black aviator gave me an acute desire to go out into the open. On the other hand, close by the heat, a lane leads me outside the walls. In the green of the meadows sleep herds of graves and mixed sheep. Soft still music of stones, blood, marrows, bones, and fleeces. Among the graves was harmony. Beyond there stood eternity. The soft rhythm of the car that takes me away from Kairouan accelerates the feverish and shameless unwinding of its chaste sash of lacy walls. Abruptly behind them, the warrior square of the houses flattens out, anxious to escape the brilliant shooting of the stars in their silver sights. In the clear, optimistic evening, under the already distant walls, a fragrant fall of soft ashes like jasmine, honeysuckle flowers were torn by the wind in the heavenly garden. The ashes scattered, they appeared to me like the white milk of camels left out to cool in the chill of the night. And that is the end of The Charm of Egypt. So thank you everybody for watching and listening. Yeah, that was some absolutely beautiful prose by Marinetti. I think it's fair to say that him being Italian and Egypt being a Mediterranean country, I think there's some sort of a Arab affinity going on there. That's something I think my good friend Hungarus on the chat can relate to. And let's just see if we've had any super chats. We've had no super chats on entropy. That's okay. Right, so I think I'm going to wrap up here unless anybody's got any final questions. In terms of any future streams, I probably will cover some of the other books Antelope Hill sent me, and we'll have a look at that. Also, today I was originally supposed to do a stream with Mike Pole on simulacra and simulation. Unfortunately, Mike's had some personal stuff come up, so we've had to postpone that again. I still hope to do that at some point in the future. I just couldn't say when. However, this Saturday at I think it'll be 9 p.m. BST, I'm going to be streaming with a Mr. Peter R. Quinones, a good mutual of mine with friends with people like Hunger and Yiz in the chat. We're going to be discussing Iranian and Israeli relations. And so if you're interested in that, go and give that a watch. Very excited to get to talk to Pete for the first time. And also, one of the main things I'm focusing on this channel is my series on modern Iran with Hunger. The next episode we hope to do the Saturday after next, which should be the 9th of August. We'll be looking at the reign of Muhammad Shah from 1834 to 1848. So thank you everybody for watching, and see you around.